Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Kink Tank. Sorry we're getting such a late start tonight for any of the live viewers that might be tuning in, but purely my fault. And we're going to have a nice topic anyways tonight. The topic is party etiquette. And so I thought, we've got a few people in the room here that have been to, let's say, a few play parties, probably in a few different dungeons. So it's good to have a panel like this when we're having these discussions, because one of the first things about dungeon party etiquette is it can change from place to place, usually in subtle ways. I mean, I think most of the dungeons that you're in across the United States anyways, I don't know about worldwide, but there are some generally good practices and some sort of pointers that you can observe. So would anybody like to start with good etiquette at a play party?
Yes. The first thing that I would like to say about it is when you go from space to space, generally the rules may be different, but the etiquette generally remains similar.
Yes.
So when we talk about etiquette, we're talking about how do we behave, how do we act, how do we treat people. What's interesting is that the etiquette seems to be a little bit different, if only because when people are in spaces that have different rules, people don't know how to react around them. So in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, typically, probably less in Ohio, generally speaking, a lot of the dungeon spaces have no sex. So you generally aren't exposed to actual sexual contact, intercourse, insertions of any kind in Kentucky and Indiana and kind of our local area. But when you go to other states, it is, and so people are like, do I watch, do I whatever? And the etiquette typically is the same. If they're performing, for lack of a better term, in public, then it's okay to watch the same way you would watch somebody getting flogged. Don't get in too close, don't interfere. We'll talk, I'm sure, about some of those actual points of etiquette. But even though the rules change, typically the etiquette is the same, even if the activities are different.
I agree. But yeah, when the rules change, then there are some questions about etiquette that will sometimes pop up, like, this isn't normally allowed, so how do I do that? How do I deal with this at the party? I was thinking that, before going to your first play party, or let's say your first play party at a particular dungeon space, beforehand, it would be best if you knew, kind of like we were talking about going to Munches, there's probably some homework that you can do, and that usually means asking other people in the community, what should I expect there? If they happen to know what the rules are, if it's a dungeon space that has a little higher visibility, you might even be able to find those rules online. And they might have some etiquette pointers there for you as well, or some people, to help teach you what's okay. I mean, I do that when someone new comes into the dungeon, like, well, there's going to be people playing and they're going to be doing this thing, but, stay out of their way and give them some space, and don't touch other people's things. And I mean, those are all good places to start. So let's talk about giving people space. That's probably one of the bigger ones that I see in dungeons is don't get too close, not just for etiquette purposes, but sometimes for safety purposes. Leave some room for people to play.
Yep. I think one of the things that I would say is that whenever you go into a space, especially if it's a new space, is take a tour around and get a layout of the space, because every space is different. I've been to a lot of spaces, for example, that will have an area designated for whips only. And so, having a lot of times they'll even be marked out on the floor. So understanding kind of where is going to be acceptable for you to stand, or where you can walk, and places that you can look. It's always a good idea to have kind of a lay of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Also, depending, and I guess this is one of the things that we didn't talk about, the best etiquette that you can show, as far as I'm concerned, aside from common courtesy, is know the rules, the actual rules for the space that you're in. So for some places, some play parties I've been to in public actually have time limits and sign-up sheets for the equipment. And so if you just park yourself on a piece of furniture like we do here, that would be frowned upon. That's kind of a no-no. But that's a function of the rule set of the space that you're in. So the first piece of etiquette, if you're going into a space that you don't know, is ask somebody, find out if the rules are posted, If they're not, and you're at the space, talk to a DM.
What's a DM?
He's the guy that makes sure that your paladin doesn't roll over a 20.
Dungeon monitor.
Gotcha.
Oh, I like Dungeon Master better. That was a great reference.
The nerds got that one. And,
I didn't laugh.
That's because it's a nerd thing.
No, it's the
and she laughs at everything. So
yeah, and I didn't laugh.
It must not have been funny.
It was funny.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
Okay.
I didn't realize you were a nerd, Shane.
It was the so you have dungeon monitors, but that expression changes depending on where you are. Fringe used the sad expression SM for safety monitor, because apparently there was safety outside of the dungeon they had to worry about. I don't know, sidewalk monitor or whatever the fuck it was. Make sure you put your butts in the can monitor. I'm not really sure. Yeah, whoever is usually wearing an orange vest, a glow stick, a funny hat. Yeah, those are the people that should know the rules for the space.
Yeah, and that's something that you should find out is because, I mean, there are such things as dungeon parties without dungeon monitors. At least around here, that's pretty commonplace at public dungeons. That might be the first thing that you do is find out how do I identify them, because they will generally change over the course of the night. You don't have one person who normally acts as a dungeon monitor all night. So find out how you identify them, because they're also they can be a good point of contact for other questions that you have. So this, knowing the rules, I agree. There are some finer points of etiquette, but part of the rules, for instance, getting in people's spaces. I mean, that's not necessarily a rule, but that is an etiquette thing, and people will be terse with you if you end up getting in their space. And I'm bringing that back because we didn't really go further into it. I'm talking about physical space. I'm also talking about just kind of like space in general. Like if you're an ogler who's standing on the sidelines, you might have enough space between you and them for them to swing their whip around or for things to happen. But you're kind of in their space because you're fucking staring at them, or other kinds of sound, for instance, really loud noises around a space. It kind of depends on what they're doing. Conversations. So if you might be further away, but if you're, you could insert yourself into somebody's space if they're having a scene and they're, in the right mind for it and they're having a great time, and then suddenly, outbursts of laughter are heard not very far. Well, it might kind of ruin their space. You're kind of inserting yourself into the space.
Right. I think there's 3 ways to ruin a scene or to interject yourself into a scene unwantedly. The first is by either standing too close or trying to make contact or trying to interfere or make conversation in any way. The second is, I agree, and it's a big one for me, is too much chit-chat or laughter in the dungeon. If there's a different space, if there's a congregation area somewhere else, take your private conversations there and do the laughing over there. The third way that I want to talk about is interrupting aftercare. Aftercare is not something I do a lot of, but it's something that I see a lot of people have ruined for them. If you see 2 people that have ended a scene and they are going through either some cuddling or some, consoling, drying tears, wiping mats, sometimes it's as simple as bundling rope. And even if it doesn't look like they might still be in a scene or in the headspace, you need to stay away anyways. Don't walk up immediately and say, hi, stick out your hand, hi, my name is such and such, that was great, I appreciate that. You might be interfering on their aftercare.
Yeah,
but I also think, if I may interject,
Please.
I also think that when you go into a scene in a public dungeon space, I understand that there will be those things that pull people out of their high, or whatever term you use. But that is something that happens in a public space. And people knowingly go into a public dungeon space knowing that there are going to be things that throw people off their headspace. That is just something that's going to happen. And to say that we need to keep people from interacting in a loud and vivacious way, I can understand going over the limits, like being overly loud. I can understand that, but sometimes there are times where people are just laughing, and for some people that may be too much. But it's also a public space,
Right.
and if you don't want that to happen, then don't play in public.
That is a good point, because some of the things that we're talking about here are sort of balancing issues. So, you know, while you're trying to provide a good space for people to play, I think it's unrealistic for people who are playing in a public dungeon to expect the same kind of level of quiet, the same level of privacy, the same, you know, the same things that they get at home. Because if that's what you want, then you should play at home.
Exactly. And it's a social environment. Like some of these people like me, I don't get to see everybody as much as everybody else gets to visit with each other. So when I do get in that space, I'm like, hell yeah, look, I get to see all these amazing people, and I do want to laugh, and I do want to chat with them.
Right, but I think the thing that we're trying to say, though, is that I think people who are out in public understand it's public, but I think that we could probably come to some kind of consensus, like porn, you know, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it, that we understand there's a reasonable amount of noise. You know, the issues that people have had is that when you're standing on the outside of someone's scene, and you're telling a joke. Someone being loud in the social area and you being kind of hypersensitive to it is one thing, but you know, people who are standing at the edge of your scene, and you know, I've had people, you know, start scenes at the edge of a scene. You know what I mean? Like they start smacking on each other. It's like, well, that's not the place to do that.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that there's a level of reason.
But who is to define that's not the right place? Because again, you're coming into a public dungeon space, and scenes are going to happen everywhere. Who are we to say, no, you can't have your scene there because they may not like it? You can't really say that.
That's part of knowing the dungeon space, and this is a good, you know, a good pointer, like knowing the rules. If there is a social area that's designated for that and a play area that's designated for that, I think that you know, sometimes, and it depends on the dungeon, sometimes there's a little bit of play going on in the social area, sometimes there's a little bit of socializing going on in the play area. And the level that's acceptable will depend on the dungeon and the people there and precedent. You know, I don't think it's cut and dried where you can say, well, it's a public dungeon, so you get what you get, and people are having fun, so it's kind of on. You know, we don't have to keep that in mind as we're socializing in the dungeon, but it also doesn't have to be, you know, Gestapo like, hey, no talking at all, and this is supposed to be the quiet area. Because sometimes scenes will even interfere with each other in that way. You know, if I'm having an interrogation scene and I've got the little lamp on the person and I'm yelling at them, and you know, we're actually going to probably interfere with your scene a little bit. But then that's like that balancing act again. Right, they're entitled to have a good scene. You're entitled to a reasonable amount of space to have your scene. And sometimes those will clash up against each other.
That's what I'm trying to say, is that comparing, you know, being in a public space where the scene next to me is loud isn't an issue for me. It's usually people who are hanging out on the fringes of a scene making noise.
Socializing.
Well, it's like I said, not even socializing. I've seen it happen where people are laughing, and then all of a sudden, because it's the fun thing to do, they'll bend somebody over and start spanking them. Well, I mean, you can't call that a scene in the middle of the dungeon and get upset when people say, hey, you know, we're trying to work over here. Michael was there. I can tell you, I was literally in the station next to the loudest scene in the history of Kink. Like, if you track the history of Kink from the Romans to now, it was the loudest scene ever. Ever. Mm-hmm. And we didn't complain about that because at least it was a scene in a space. Right? We complained about it after the fact to a dungeon monitor, saying, you know, maybe there's some reasonable things that could be done here, but we didn't interfere with their scene or ask them to stop because they were in a designated play area doing their designated play.
Right. I think probably the worst sort of example of bad etiquette in a dungeon has to do with this, as far as like interrupting or being in people's space or the sound levels. I think one of the worst things that you can do is stand on the side of a scene and comment on the scene itself. Mm-hmm. So, you know, something I think that we do pretty well around this area. You know, we all kind of know each other, even people from the adjacent cities. The Kink community is pretty wide and big. there is a certain amount of sort of non-judgmental etiquette there. You know, we're watching a scene and we may be very close and they might be doing something really cool or something that I've never seen before and I don't understand. So I might be doing some of this to, like, you know, the person next to me, like, what is that? What are they, you know, what's that for? What is that thing he's holding in his hand? You know, that's fine if you're keeping that to a minimum or whatever, but if it's like, you know, especially if you're just like one of those mean girls that's just like, I can't believe she took that dress off. Look at her, you know, or like, you know.
I've never seen that.
No.
I've
Don't
never
say
seen
that.
it
That'll
either.
make me paranoid.
I've never seen that either in a dungeon space. But you know, if I'm a rigger and I'm watching someone else do their rope scene and I'm commenting saying
That happens.
That's true.
and I'm sitting there saying, that tie looks really shitty to me. I think he should go back to rope school. You know,
And
that would be, you know, to comment on that out loud is terrible, terrible etiquette. To comment at all in the scene. It's great when you want to go up to somebody after their aftercare is done, after their scene's done, when they're sort of out of the space, and say, that was really cool. I liked that. Was, you know, can you teach me something about that? That's good etiquette, to wait for that time. And if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say anything at all. I mean, I think that's the etiquette, especially when you're, you know, standing there. Nobody wants any criticism. They're playing in public. They're putting themselves out there. Even if you think that something is unsafe, that's not something that you would interrupt the scene for anyways, because I think, by and large, nationwide, the etiquette there is you don't interrupt scenes. You go to the dungeon monitor or the person who's hosting the party, and you get them to interrupt if you think that something is terribly wrong or could be terribly wrong. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about interrupting. Brian, you had mentioned interrupting just, you know, sort of in general, you know, people coming in, like, trying to be a part of a scene, like, well, not part of a scene, but just, wow, that's really cool. And you're, like, right in the middle of doing something. And you're like, fuck off out of my space here. For, you know, wait till I'm done. I'll talk to you about it all night.
I've had people interrupt my scenes to, like, basically break them down. Like, I like what you did right there. Tell me why you did it. I'm like, maybe not now.
Yeah.
Yep. I've been in positions where I've had a bottom in full suspension in, you know, reasonably complicated ties, and I've had twice now somebody approach me and want to have a conversation with me about it, and one of them actually put his hand on my girl. And wait, what the fuck? Hold on. You need to just go away. And I was in a position where I wouldn't even address it. I just said, no, go away, no, 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 until he finally, you know, figured out and got it. And of course that ruined the scene. I got the girl down, and then, you know, after everything was okay and things were good, I went over to, you know, to both of them and, you know, kind of tried to explain as nicely as I could that this is not something you do. And there's a safety issue involved in lots of different scenes. Rope is one of them. That's a safety issue, to go and, you know, distract somebody that's got somebody hanging upside down by 3 toes.
Is there ever a time when it's okay to interrupt somebody's scene?
There is, but it has to be pre-negotiated. I've got a couple people that I tie with a lot, and we are very good friends. And there are times and places for that, I think, where it's acceptable if you know the person really well in advance and you know that they might be interested in some feedback or some critique or some help or just some conversation. But I would say, in general, when in doubt, don't.
But I guess it's interesting, though, even in that example, though, Brian, basically what you're saying is if you have a tacit understanding with people that basically it's okay for them to come into your scene, so they are de facto part of that scene. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. My perspective is, you know, if you've negotiated with somebody, they're not really interrupting you per se. So my argument is, no, it's never acceptable to interrupt people. You understand what I'm saying in terms of that distinction?
I would imagine.
And
I would imagine also that even people that are real, you know, close to you, while you're in a scene, might give you that, even if it's just a little bit of like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll just give you a reasonable example.
Honestly, there's only one time it's okay for someone to interrupt a scene, and that's when someone spots a rope slipping and it could choke somebody out someone could fall and the top does not notice and the bottom does not notice. I believe that is
find
the
a
only
DM.
time.
I think find a DM.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That would be
Okay.
the
Yes.
only
Yes.
time.
Yes. I thought you meant just anybody that wants to
No,
can
no, no,
say,
no,
oh,
no.
I don't know about
Common
this. I'm going to
sense would
stop
be to
this.
find a DM and let the DM know, and that would be the only time I could see it's okay to interrupt a scene.
And we did that,
Yes.
actually. That happened with us in...
Let's finish this out, but when we get done with this, we should talk about what happens if the DM interrupts your scene, because your reaction should be completely different.
Right. So my feeling on interrupting scenes is it's never okay.
No.
It's never okay unless you're a DM. But even then,
agree.
you need a pretty fucking good reason.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's a fire or like there are people coming in, like unless there's something really immediately wrong.
Well, not just a safety thing, but if they're breaking the rules, then it's the DM's prerogative to interrupt your scene and say, "You guys can't do that here. Sorry." You know.
Although I will argue one point that Brian made, and this is just a personal thing. So if anybody has a different answer, I completely accept that. But from my perspective, because I think it's more of a personal reflection, if a DM were to interrupt my scene, I like to think that I would not treat them any differently than somebody else interrupting my scene. I might think they're a jackalope, but it's not in my best interest to treat people like a jackass, even if they're acting like a jackass. I would just ask them to, I'm not done yet, please leave. However, I would courteously do that, but that's a function of me. You know what I mean? I can understand why you would be angry and frustrated, but that's one of those things where it's much easier to not let something escalate. Now, a DM, on the other hand, the only way I treat a DM differently is if a DM says, "Oh, this is dangerous, you have to stop," then what I'm hearing is an explanation of the rules, and I'm required to stop. So there's a little bit more finality to what they say. If Joe Blow tells me my scene isn't safe, well, Joe Blow can politely go fuck himself.
Mm-hmm.
If a DM says your scene is unsafe and you have to stop it, it stops.
It stops.
That is the difference. Yes.
You can argue the finer points of it later.
If Joe Blow comes up and wants to have a conversation and put his hand on my girl, I'm going to say, hey, get the fuck out. I have no idea what you're about to say to me, but I don't even want to hear it. Just leave. Whereas if a DM comes up to me, that's somebody I need to respect, and I need to hear them out. And if they say, hey, get her down, this looks unsafe, I'm going to do it. And the etiquette on that is, just for anybody that's interested, get the person out of the scene, remove the danger, and then talk it out, even if you disagree with the DM.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you might have a grievance, later, and you might even have a leg to stand on, but the DM's word needs to be final for all of this to work smoothly. And generally, in the rules, you'll see something to that effect, that the DMs have the authority to stop scenes, to kick people out, to whatever they need to do. That power is given to them, at least for the time that they're wearing the silly hat or the vest or the light stick. So I think that all good points of etiquette. I would like to see in dungeon spaces. I don't see too many interrupted scenes. I don't see too many times where a DM needs to intervene. But for those non-DMs who maybe are showing bad etiquette or don't understand the etiquette about interrupting scenes, I would like to see a little bit more grace from people who are playing.
That's what I was trying to say.
And sort of treat it as a teachable moment rather than a "you cretin, you should know better," and yell, pick a fight, whatever, not.
Especially if that person is new.
If that person is new, I would like people to treat it as, I know you were in a great space and they interrupted, and that's bad. Okay.
The only exception that I make to that, this again is just a personal thing, is if I'm playing with a single tail and they come into single tail range, I'm probably less likely to warn them before they get whacked than after.
Right. But you might have a polite conversation with them after. When you took that whip in the face, let's talk about how we can avoid that again.
I will cop to it being a little passive-aggressive, but I think that, if I'm swinging a whip and you walk into range, I have earned a certain amount of latitude with not having to change what I'm doing on your dumbass's behalf.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the indignant. How dare you get into my space? How dare you, interrupt that? I understand, because some people their scenes are heavy. They might be in a different frame of mind at the time. They're used to a certain amount of respect for etiquette in that way. but I would like to see more reciprocal reactions. You walked through my space for on the way to your scene.
Well,
You basically walked through for 2 seconds. I mean, is that the biggest deal on Earth, or is it something that I can say, hey, afterwards, you kind of walked through our thing. Maybe not do that next time. Thanks.
I think
Rather than
sometimes-
how dare you?
I think
Right.
sometimes people use it
Yeah.
as an opportunity to puff their chest.
Well,
Yes.
maybe what I would like to see with the new opening of the space is maybe it was something we did at the other club in Baltimore, which is it's a much bigger club and there's a lot more people, but it was still a great thing for newcomers. They had a tour guide, and basically what this person did is they introduced them to the space, introduced them to what is social play, what is socializing, and where is play at, and also they went over the rules with them. Like, hey, here's a quick rundown. Don't interrupt people's scenes, stay out of people's space. So this way they're not coming into the space unknowing. At least they're getting a rundown of things. And if someone could volunteer their time to do that, maybe they get into the play party free or whatever. But it could be something that could really help the space. If there's someone there who knows the rules, who could just provide that for newcomers coming into the space. I think with the lack of people giving education to the newcomers coming in, this is half the problem, is there is not people educating the newcomers.
Yeah, because I just listening to your all's conversation so far, I'm pretty sure I have been guilty of some of this already, and I haven't even
But
been
you
here that
haven't-
long.
You've been to a
No,
party.
I've been to
public-
ropes. I've been to rope things. I mean, I think I've definitely been guilty of some of these things, and it's not intentional, which goes back to what Michael said about grace. Be graceful, because obviously I would
Yeah.
never intend to be rude or disrespectful to anyone, and so you don't. Sometimes when people do mess up, you shouldn't be so have patience, because that's gonna make you look better. But I completely agree with Cupcake. I think that's a great idea.
It all comes down to education.
Mhm.
And, we get
Yeah.
on to people oh, you should have known better. No, because lately common sense is not so common anymore. Come on, guys.
So here's the thing that I gleaned from this, at least for the viewership. If you have an opportunity to take a tour of the dungeon with someone, take it. That if there is something in place like that, if there's somebody to go over the rules with you, if there's somebody to walk you through it and show you the different areas. This is our social area. This is our rope suspension area. This is a whip area. This is a aftercare area. So we try to keep it really quiet over there. If you have an opportunity to do that, then do that.
Do that. And the extra benefit of that is if you are brand new to the space and probably brand new to the community there as well, you'll have a friend. That's a good time to make small talk and to get to know
Exactly.
at least one person, and hopefully that person may even introduce you to a couple more people. So you'll at least know a couple names and faces and have some people to chat with.
Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes it happens where I'm riding over to a party with somebody who's never been to one before, and I've got 2 minutes to sort of sum it up, to try and make sure that they don't cause a problem or make me look like I'm bringing some asshole to a party. There are just a few things that I cover, and one of those is the space thing, giving people enough space to have their scenes. The other one is the interrupting things, about never interrupting. But I think the third point, if we only had to have 3 golden rules of play parties, the third one is not touching anything that isn't yours.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that.
Which includes people.
Mhm.
Sometimes people belong to other people.
Well, no. Hold on. Let's back up. I'd really like to see people taken off that list, because owned or otherwise, you shouldn't be touching people you don't know. So let's just have a round of common sense here for a second. I'm not going to walk into a space and go, ooh, that girl doesn't have a collar. Wee!
Well, Shane, like I said earlier, common sense is not so common anymore. So
Which is why I am
all rules
interjecting
need
it.
to be pointed out.
Yeah, and I agree with Shane that the assumption should be that's a different rule, about you don't interact with people in that way, and that's no different. In fact, there might even be a heightened sense of boundaries around play parties when people are naked or have their sexy clothes on, or might be in a compromising position. You know, if they're bent over a table and their ass is hanging out of their skirt, that is not an invitation to come and spank. But, you know, just in general, I'm talking about inanimate things. You know, don't touch anything that isn't yours.
People want to grab toys all the time.
Yeah, there's lots of cool stuff, and when you've not been to a lot of play parties, you will see a lot of things that you haven't. Or, you know, for some people, you know, rope never gets old. Oh my God, what's that? I've never seen that before. Or a certain flogger. That is the most awesome flogger I've ever seen. And then they want to pick it up, you know, swing it around, test it on themselves. No, no, you don't. Because, one, it's just fucking rude. You don't pick up people's things at other events. I don't know why a play party would be different. Two, some of these things have significance that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Or they're much more expensive than you could imagine. So you're picking up this thing, this awesome flogger, that cost the person $500. Now, I know Shane would say they overpaid. But
no, but I was going to say, Michael, as a side note, I don't know if you heard David Morgan died today.
No, I didn't.
So your Morgan whip might just be worth, you know.
Oh, it just appreciated in value?
Yeah, it's like, you know, all of that memorabilia, you know, Beatles memorabilia just went up.
I'm talking, yeah. But it is that kind of thing. It's like, that is a toy that is specifically for this person, and you're fucking touching it. Because you didn't have the common courtesy to say, is it all right if I touch this? It only takes a minute. You know, if nobody's around, then the rule is don't touch it. You know.
Well, and I'm going to throw one more in there. That might be for your own personal safety, because you don't know where that thing has been, what bodily fluids are on it. That thing might have just broke skin in a scene 5 minutes before you picked it up. It's just a bad idea.
Yeah, and that's one that I can say we can, in a blanket sort of way, never a good idea. You know, just don't touch something that's yours. I also think that, you know, part of the space thing and part of the being careful about walking through scenes, especially in between two people scening. That's especially egregious. So, you know, watch where you're going and don't fucking touch anything.
I think just try to have some spatial awareness is a good way of putting that. Just kind of understand where you are at any given time.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, hang out in the social area and find somebody that you know that has some experience there and hang out with them and say, listen, I want to go check out the dungeon. Do you want to come with me? Because then you're with somebody who has a better sense of what the sort of the general practices of the space you're in are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having a buddy is not exactly a bad thing.
How should you dress?
According to rule space.
That's usually spelled out somewhere in the rules?
Well,
my experience it is.
Usually it is, and if you don't know, find out. And this, I think, was the opening of the episode, was do some research before you go. And if it's not posted, if it's not clear, get a hold of the organizer, get a hold of the host, and ask, hey, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate? And, you know, follow that. And where, you know, if a lot of times the dress code is, well, you know, be clothed coming in and out of the space, but once you're in the space, you know, maybe everything goes. Of comfort, but particularly if you're brand new to a space, err on the side of being a little bit conservative.
You bring up a good point, and it's one, especially for private play parties, are some things that you need to find out beforehand, because usually at private play parties at people's houses, in their neighborhood, with their neighbors around, it's fine if they have a shitload of people over for a bridge party, but those people generally don't come dressed up in, you know, high whore leather.
Exactly.
Carrying suitcases full of, you know, with props sticking out of the top and.
Right. So find that out, and sometimes even the public dungeon spaces have things like that too. Some of them will say, you know, street legal. You can't walk in from your car into their place naked. So they might say street legal, but then whatever you want inside. You know, but generally speaking, I think it's good if you can tone it down a little bit until you get into the door. If you're unsure, then err on the side of caution there. where you don't want to make a spectacle of yourself outside of the dungeon for maybe onlookers. It depends on, you know, some of these dungeon spaces are right across from bagel shops, and you don't necessarily want to draw attention to the fact that there's a bunch of freaky people going into this space to do their freaky shit.
Yeah, and as part of the etiquette, oddly enough, surrounding clothing as well, it's going to depend sometimes based on the space that you're in. But if you're going to be naked, bring something to sit on.
Bring a towel.
Please.
Where's your towel? This is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Know where your towel is.
That is such a good point of etiquette, and that's one that I see often overlooked. Yeah, if you're not going to have your ass covered, don't sit on the furniture. Put something down.
And clean up your space after you play.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's good etiquette. Usually that's a rule as well, but that's something that I think that you should be prepared to do. So good etiquette is cleaning up your space when you're done. That might be a rule, but it's just good etiquette because nobody wants to get on a cross and start having a scene and, you know, get up there and find that it's been sweated all over. You know,
you do it at the gym.
That's gross.
Right? Clean up after yourself. Can I throw one out there, especially as it relates to clothing? This is kind of an interesting one that is actually going to pertain to some of the people here, which is if you're going to go outside to smoke, remember you are now again in a public space.
Mm-hmm.
So clothing matters, right? When you go out, be aware of your surroundings. And I will admit this is probably just a personal one, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. In addition to clothes outside being a thing, playing outside of the designated play space is a thing as well.
It should not be a thing. It is never a thing.
That's my point. So if
Exactly.
we happen to be outside the space, that's not the place to pull your whip out and start whacking somebody in the smoking area. That is not cool.
Right.
You know, same thing. And I will admit this is a personal thing. It may apply to others as well. But, you know, tying people up at coffee, that's a no bueno. You know,
Agreed.
Bringing out the violet wand to show it off, not a cool thing. Now, I make toys for a living. I deliver them in public spaces, but I deliver them in bags. Right? So people know that they're getting it, but I don't be roaming it around. And even if I did, I submit that shit to the fair. I'm not using them. I'm delivering them. So be conscious of the space that you're in and what is appropriate.
I agree. I've seen
a number of TKs in public spaces where I go, maybe not now. You know, maybe.
Oh, but Shane, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not sexual, and it can be. You could excuse that in any number of ways. That you guys are, you know, mountain climbers, and this is a rescue harness, or you're a Boy Scout, and it's a, you know.
I'm fast thinking and quick talking. I could explain a whip scene in the middle of the fucking park if I wanted to. It doesn't mean it's any more appropriate because I can justify it.
Well, and I mean, look at how it makes us perceived as, like, in general, as a kinky group. How do people start perceiving us if we pull off that stuff in public?
Well,
I might be a prude, but
I don't disagree with you, especially for a dungeon space. Keeping it inside is a big, you know, I think that's just a good rule. Just, you know, trying not to bring attention to the fact that there's a dungeon space inside there is a good point of discretion for everybody. So when you're outside, you know, maybe it's the way that you're dressed, maybe it's the things that you're doing, and especially if you're close to something else, you know, a business, a bunch of homes, you know, you're a guest in someone's house and you step outside to smoke, the conversation that you're having in the middle of, you know, July when their neighbors are next door trying to sleep with the windows open, hearing every word of your conversation about the scene that you just had inside, not cool. You know, keep it down, keep it contained within the space. Very good point. Here's a question I wanted to ask. Will somebody play with me?
I don't know if you ask nicely. Maybe. I mean, I can't speak for that.
Not personally.
Oh.
If I go to a play party, will somebody play with me?
Sure.
Not guaranteed. Like,
Well,
he's gonna
if you
walk
look
in
obligated.
assuming that'll be a thing.
If you look like Kenzie, I'm sure you'll have no trouble picking.
If-
I was about to say, it
I
depends
mean-
on who you are. If you're
Okay.
a girl, let's be sexist for a minute. If you're a girl, you can find someone to play with you most of the time.
Yeah.
If I were to break this down, I think we use the sort of the Munch analogy, which is if you go expecting to play, you might be disappointed, but it is perfectly okay to go to a party and to ask.
Okay. So let's
As long
talk
as you're
about.
not, as long as you're not, crushed if somebody says no. And I realize that girls aren't used to hearing no, but it does happen on occasion.
Excuse me, Shane.
Excuse me, Shane.
Yes.
No, that's true, and it might be for a couple reasons, and it might not have anything to do with the girl itself. It might be that the
No.
person. It might be that the person you've asked has a full docket, has a full dance card for the night, has other plans, is leaving early, is tired. It could be that the person that you've seen just beating two girls, it's not within their dynamic to play with anybody but those two girls. Like, there's a lot of things. That
No, it was the comment about girls not expecting
Yeah, I
rejection.
don't agree with the assumption that.
Oh, no. Sorry, I
all
was
the time,
ripping
because I
off
get
of
told
Emily's.
no
If you
on a
look like
conversation.
Kenzie, I'm sure somebody will,
Oh,
I mean, of
How
all the
come no
people
one
that
said
are
anything
there,
about that?
they will find somebody.
How come no
But-
one said anything about that? Just out of curiosity. Just no. All right.
I
good.
didn't hear the question. What was
I
it?
didn't hear the question either.
I'm just saying I was riffing off of what Emily said about, if you're a girl, there's a good chance. And I said, well, as long as you're not disappointed because you're so used to hearing yes, and all of a sudden I'm the dick.
Oh, well, I'm just
we
saying.
heard it the wrong way. I'm sorry. I
Yes.
thought you were saying, like, females in general are not used to hearing, like, being rejected, and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But now it makes total sense, because I thought you were just being, like, a little misogynist right there.
No, I'm a huge
Had to
misogynist,
put a
but
halt
not in
to
that
that.
particular moment.
It's like, Shane, I expected better.
Again,
was
though,
gonna
that was
say, I get
following a
rejected
comment
a lot.
prefaced by,
Me
I'm going to
too.
sound like a sexist, but nobody jumped on that.
Well, I think that, when it comes to etiquette for asking, or finding somebody to play at a play party, I think at a play party, generally, the etiquette that I've observed is if you want to play with somebody, asking is not a problem. It's everything that happens after you ask and get your answer that becomes the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into the asking somebody if they will play with the expectation that they will say no, or that you are ready, you are prepared to hear no, then we're going to be fine, because nobody needs to give you an answer. Like you were saying, Brian, you might be tired, you might be leaving early, you might already have your dance card full. Now those are nice things, if you don't want to play with someone, you might even say some of those things even though they're not true, just to be a little kinder. But I submit to you that nobody needs to, no thanks would be nice, but I don't think that your responsibility to explain why not. I don't think there is any responsibility to explain why not. And making somebody try to explain why not is bad form.
True.
So as long as you are willing to accept no as your answer, no thanks would be nice. But then it's not a problem. You can ask every single person at the party if they want to play.
I have seen that happen. I
And
have.
as long as you're ready to hear no 100 times, then we're fine. But if you're going to get all, offended, or if it's going to hurt your ego, or if it's going to, cause a problem for you, then maybe don't ask.
Although, to be fair, most people who ask everyone at the party don't have a problem with their ego.
Correct. Because they will get rejected by more people at the party if you are asking everybody. It's just statistically more likely.
Well,
Plus-
I know if I am third choice or fourth choice or fifth choice.
Yes,
fuck
exactly.
it. No, absolutely no, on principle.
See,
Right.
I don't mind that because I am third or fourth choice sometimes. I don't mind that if I can play a little bit, especially if it's with someone I want to play with. I don't really see it as that, because I'm like, oh, if
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people said no and I finally get to play with someone I've been wanting to play with, I don't give a fuck.
I guess
Yeah.
if I wanted to play with them, it'd be fine. But there's a lot of people that ask me to play as a top that I'm just kind of like, yeah, whatever about. And I will usually play as a top because I'm a pretty safe choice as a top, I think. Like, I'm not going to creep on people most of the time. And I think that that's a concern for a lot of newer submissive girls or boys, that they're just looking for somebody that's not going to do anything, but they can still try out some things. And if I'm second or third choice in that circumstance, I think it's fine. But if it's somebody that I actually want to play with, I don't know.
We have a lot of top identified people here. I would just say, if we're speaking about etiquette and you want to ask somebody to play, be courteous and try to know something about them. I've had a number of people ask me to play because I'm a guy and I had a toy bag, so clearly 1 + 1 = 3. And
Right.
that's not the case. Generally speaking, if you want to play, and I will speak on behalf of the people who are top identified here, typically speaking, the tops that I know don't want to play with people in the sense of it being that unknown and that random. I mean, try to know the person's name, for one. I realize that sounds obvious, but in a lot of cases it's not.
No, it's not. When you're at a play party, you've never met them.
Yeah.
And try to at least have some idea when you're talking to them about why you would like to play with them. Right? I want to get hit, for most people, is insufficient reason for the tops I know to want to play with you.
Well, that's something that's covered in the negotiation after. I mean, I think going up and saying to somebody, would you like to play with me? That's fine. That's acceptable. But I think it's more productive if you can be more explicit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad form if you're not, but
no, I was talking about improving your chances.
Yes, improving your chances, absolutely. If you know my name, if we already know each other, that will improve your chances with me because I don't play with a whole lot of strangers.
I think it's great especially with submissives, like requesting to play. I always think it's better, I agree with Shane, to know what you're looking for, because if I went up to Shane and said, hey, you have a toy bag, I'd like to play. Well, I don't know what I want to play with, I don't know what I want to do, and I don't know what he specializes in. But if I was a submissive and I go up to him and say, hey, I've watched you play with whips, I've researched it, and you know what you're doing with whips, I would like to see what it's like to be whipped. It's much more productive to go into something knowing what you want and knowing what the person is capable of doing.
Yeah, I think it'll get better results when you feel like the person that you're asking, that you're not just trying to find a piece of meat to be on the other end of your scene. That there is a reason that you're asking them in particular.
Exactly.
And if I might add, the one thing that I think is really important about what Cupcake said there is, if somebody came to me, for example, and said, I know who you are, I know you've got a good reputation, I would love for you to tie me up, I would say, I don't really do rope, but that guy over there that I know and trust might be a lot more, is a lot more capable of doing that than I am. Why don't you go talk to them? And I might even go over and take you there to talk to that person. So knowing what you want, knowing what you're interested in, and having sense enough to talk to people that you have a feeling of confidence about, in however form that comes, whether it's a friend recommended them or you've actually seen them do whatever it is that they do. But when you take that approach, it tends to open more doors for you.
Yes.
Again, it's just courtesy.
Yes. But back, full circle to the beginning, I think coming to a play party, not knowing anybody or coming by yourself with any kind of expectation that you're going to get to play is a bad way to walk in.
Absolutely.
That if you sometimes people make plans before a party where, hey, I wanted to try this, and they sort of work it out on their own. Well, let's do that at the dungeon this weekend. They, fine. Then maybe you should come with the expectation of play. It's already prearranged. If you came to a party with somebody and you already have a willing partner, then yeah, you can expect to play. But in any other case, I think you're going to be disappointed, and you might end up coming across as just one of those, hey, you want to play? You want to play? I'm looking to play.
Yeah.
Will you play?
Yeah.
And that's generally not very well received in my experience. So just come with the expectation of watching and socializing and networking to a place where your odds of getting to play at future parties will be more favorable.
It's interesting that you said that, because I was going to say, if you ask 100 people to play, you might get one person to say yes, but those same 100 people are likely to say no the next time you see them.
Yes.
The more you keep up that behavior, it essentially develops a reputation where people don't want to play with you.
Because you'll ask anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
People want to feel special. You have to make people,
Right.
if you're... Now, this is all coming from, I feel like a lot of this is coming as a submissive asking a dominant. I don't feel like we've approached the concept of a top approaching a submissive at all. I mean, like, I feel like that's different, because you don't go up to a sub. I wouldn't go up to Kinsey. Kinsey, I hear that you're a really good whip bottom. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a thing. Do people do that?
It happens. I have talked to people that I know. See, here's the interesting thing, but I think it boils down to the same thing. I have done that with people that I know, or people that I have gotten to know. Mm-hmm. So I know, for example, there are some people in Lexington that I've done some stuff with because we've had a chance to speak and have had some common interests, and I know that their interests align with mine. And so sometimes I will say, hey, if you're free, if you're going to be at a party, and you're up for it, but it's always almost more like a prearranged kind of thing, which is, if we happen to be sharing space at some point in the future, let's do this. But it's the one thing I think is really critical, if you are a top talking to a bottom about play, is never try to approach it with that kind of power exchange in mind. You can't dictate to somebody that they're going to play with you. Don't come at them like, hey, you're a submissive, stand over there so I can hit you. That is
retweet.
Yeah, that is bad form. You have to treat people, quite frankly, and again, this is common sense that needs to be spelled out because it's not common. You need to treat everybody with respect and dignity. You can't just presume that your, checkbox title of master on FetLife gets you any special street cred when you're in a play space. It just ain't going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, and for my interest in play, maybe because they're not as specific as some others, as a top approaching a bottom, it's usually not a skills-based thing. It's not like, well, I know that you're a very gifted spanking bottom, or that it may be that you're really into this, and I'm into it too. That might be a common thread, but usually it's because I think you're cool, and I think you're fun, and I think you're sexy, so can we do something, and that's fine too. And actually saying those things might increase your chances. It depends on who you're talking to and probably how you say it.
Honestly, yeah, that's true, because as a submissive, it is awesome to come and be the one asked from a top to play, because that doesn't happen often. In Baltimore, it happened more frequently because, yes, so you notice bottoms were more specialized in certain areas, or they could withstand more or something of that nature. So it is always nice to have a top come and say, hey, I really just want to get my hands on you or something because I think you're gorgeous and I just want to mess with your mind or something and fuck you up. That's always nice to hear. What submissive does not want to hear from a top that they want to fuck their shit up?
Fuck you up, right. Well, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Cupcake, but I think the common theme, whether you're approaching a top or approaching a bottom, is, hey, I have seen you play, and
exactly.
I'm intrigued, and
exactly.
That's the key.
It is the
I
knowledge.
have seen you play.
Yeah.
That gets you a step ahead in my book.
Make it personal.
If no one has seen me play and they don't know how I play or have experienced that type of play, I'm probably not going to play with you, because I do have some expectations of the way I play, and that is why I'm so choosy with the people I play with. You can ask around. I don't just play with anybody. I'm very particular about who I play with, and I'm not one of those bottoms who will openly play with everybody.
Yeah,
so,
but I can't lie. It's not just a skills thing for me, and I think for bottoms, it's not a skill. Oh, they could really fuck me up, or take me to a new place, or teach me something new, or play with me with such awesome prowess. They're like, yeah, she's fucking hot. I want her to beat on me.
That's true too.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
But it is nice as a top or bottom to know that that person understands who you are.
Right, but Michael, like you said, if I don't have to justify my no, I don't have to justify my yes either.
Right. All right. Well said. The reasons I want to play with you are my own.
That's just added cushion.
Yeah. I would like to, and I would like to see the etiquette get away from any kind of justification, even if you're trying to be nice, because then when other people, it's kind of like, the thing about, single women at the bar and they're being approached by people and they use this, look, I'm married or I'm engaged or something. That's your justification. You're not saying, I think you're a creep and I would never in a million years accept a drink from you or want to spend any more than 3 seconds in a room with you. You're saying, sorry, I can't. And I think that it's more productive if we can all just say no, thank you, and accept no, thank you.
Okay,
Because
well
then
the
nobody has
problem,
to be put in a position where they feel like they need to explain or to expect an explanation.
well then I feel like the problem comes into, I had a guy just at the other party who just kept following me around, like came and interrupted my end of the scene stuff, was sitting there at the end of the mat, just, asking a lot of questions, and it was said, hey, we're having aftercare time, this is a time where we need together to be alone. And it was something where it was said very frequently without trying to be, rude to a newcomer, that you are interrupting space, like you're interrupting, and they just did not get the picture. So I literally had to like take him over because he was following me everywhere. I literally had to take him over to one of my friends and drop him off.
You pawned them off on one of your friends. Very nice
Yes,
of you.
to get
So
him off of me.
that brings me to one of the questions that I wanted to cover in here. What do I do if there's some sort of problem? And that, if I'm made to feel uncomfortable at a play party, or if I'm having trouble with the equipment, or I'm, something like that. What do you do when you have a problem like that?
Well,
Dungeon monitor?
I know there's a group of us that have like a safe word, but at the moment everybody was busy.
Dungeon monitor, like Kinsey was saying.
Dungeon
That's
monitor.
true.
If you're at a private play party, then it helps to know who the host of the party is, whose house it is.
Hopefully,
Sometimes,
if you're at a private party, you do know who the host is.
not
Yeah.
necessarily. You might be guested
be a
in,
plus one.
but I would like to think that the first thing that your date would do is take you to the person throwing the party so that you can thank them.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, hopefully, you have a good enough. Thank you for inviting me or letting me come to this party. Like,
Yeah.
I feel that that's
Right.
important.
Thanks
Think
for
would be
letting
nice.
a stranger into your house.
Yes. So I think that knowing who you can go to is good practice, because if it's a dungeon issue, then a DM, if there is one, then you want to know who you can go to for that. If it's just in general, like for instance, somebody following you around and won't leave you alone, the DM has power there, but it might even be more productive to go to the host of the party to say, this person's causing a problem for me. But that comes with all kinds of gooey things attached to it as well.
Yeah.
So if Cupcake, you're following me around and I'm not okay with it and I can't seem to get rid of you and you're making me uncomfortable, and I go to Shane, who's hosting the party, and then if I want Shane to do something about it, then I have to let Shane do something about it. And that might include Shane going to that person saying, get out of here, or stop doing that, or I'm going to, kick you out. But then this is what keeps people from doing this, is because then now, Cupcake, that that I know, that I said something to somebody, and now you are upset with me for getting you kicked out of the party. So some people don't feel like they can do anything. I've had that happen before at parties.
Yeah.
People are like, this person touched me in a way that was not cool. And my question was, what would you like me to do about it? I will talk to them, and I will shake my finger at them, or I will kick them out or whatever, but they are going to know that you came to me to complain about it. Is that okay? Not everybody's willing to do that. But knowing who to go to, even if you don't want them to do anything about it, even if you can handle it yourself, or you're not prepared for some kind of problem that may cause,
Yeah.
it does help for the host and the person in charge of the party to know.
Yeah, I just always, that's the problem, is I always feel bad about any consequences that might happen to that person. Like, I don't want to cause problems, and that is half the problem, though.
Right. But I think it's good then if you can go and say, I really don't want you to do anything, but I'm telling you to let you know that
In case
maybe,
it happens again.
yeah, maybe keep a closer eye on this person, because when collectively more than one person is coming up to the host to say this person's kind of a bad apple as far as, creepiness or consent or, whatever, that could be enough for that person to say, you know what, this person's really ruining the party for everybody else. People don't feel safe here. They don't feel like they can do X, Y, Z. It's still productive, I think. But knowing who to go to is
Yeah.
an
Well, and
important
I
part.
think there's two situations where if it's a situation where this guy is like blanket creeping a lot of people out, or all the males out, or all the females out, or if it's a girl that's creeping all of the whoever out, yeah, go to the host, go to the DM. We kind of scoffed at Cupcake's response of, oh, well, I just pawned him off on someone else. That's actually not a bad idea, so long as you pick and choose who you pawn this creepy guy off onto.
It was
Try
negotiated.
and hold on. Try and pawn him off onto someone that is not his gender and or identity that he's going to target. No, that's actually a really good way to do it. If this is a heterosexual guy that's hitting on all the the hot little blonde girls, take him over to another guy and kind of give the guy the nod and say, hey, why don't you watch him for a little bit? That
And
removes
this
yourself from the
was
situation a little bit.
negotiated. This
Right.
was negotiated. I had talked to this person beforehand, and he said, hey, if you're having problems, just, bring them over this way, and I'll pull you out of the situation. So it wasn't like I just went
Exactly.
and on.
Cupcake, you can pawn
Exactly.
anyone off on me. I'll protect you.
No,
Oh.
Kenzie, they might get you.
I'll protect you.
Are we getting close to the end here, Michael?
Pretty close. I got
Okay.
another question I want to get to.
Okay,
but-
well, before you, I've got to throw this in because there are people here tonight who are voiceless, and I have to throw this out. In any dungeon space that you are in, if it is available, boot blacking is a scene. So
Okay.
don't interrupt boot blacks while they're working. Obviously, if they're not with somebody, ask them. It's like asking someone to play. Are you available? Do you mind doing my boots? Be appropriate, whatever else. Boot blacks have the same right to refuse anybody if they want to. They don't owe anybody shit. And if you see your friend getting their boots done, wait until they're done to talk to them. Because sometimes there's an interaction going on you don't want to interrupt. Good etiquette.
Also, that
Number
goes
2.
for self-suspenders.
Yeah, and number 2, tip your boot black. This is courtesy and it is etiquette. And if you don't tip your boot black, there's a good chance they won't ever, work on your stuff again. It's just common courtesy.
I agree. And Cupcake, you make a good point. I want to expand on that. It's not just self-suspenders. It's people who play by themselves.
Exactly.
Anybody. There are some exhibitionists in some dungeon spaces. There are people who, they're in a space by themselves and they're having their own scene without another person. And, it's hard to know sometimes when they're not partnered like that, whether they're in a scene or not. But be aware of the fact that you might be encroaching on somebody's scene. And if they shoo you away, then you know better. And like I said, a little bit of grace goes a long way for the people that are in the scenes. So when somebody comes up, to a self-suspender and says, that's a really cool knot, or a way to do it. I've never considered doing it that way. Instead of, get the fuck out of here, it'd be more like, I'm kind of having a thing right now. So
now, if I can add this almost as a humorous thing, just for this, because this actually just happened to me with the last rope pile. If a self-suspender asks you to join their scene immediately, it's usually because there's something wrong. And don't take it personally, because somebody was like, I can't reach a rope to get myself upright. Can you help me? You know what? No, I don't feel comfortable. We don't really know each other. I realize the blood is rushing to your head, but let me find someone else that I would think might be more comfortable. Grab the rope, give them a
If you
hand.
are invited into a scene, go. If you are
Well,
not,
I think I was more than invited.
right. If you are invited into a scene, go. If you are not invited, keep your distance. And the other thing to mention with exhibitionists and self-suspenders is, if you see somebody that is self-suspending or playing with themselves, that is not indicative that they have nobody to tie them. So don't walk up to a self-suspender and just say, "Oh, I see you're tying yourself. I do some rope. Maybe you should get your ass down and I'll tie you up." Never do that.
Yeah, somebody playing with themselves.
Unless it's me and you're Mr. Michael, Emily, Shane, or Brian.
She's very selective about who she plays with, obviously.
Well, she didn't. She felt bad leaving anybody out.
I see. Something I will actually, one more thing I do want to point out. Maybe this is common sense, but I've actually seen this happen. So I know there's been a problem with in the past where there's been somebody who likes to be humiliated, and they have a lot of people that are allowed to humiliate them. Just because like 2 or 3 people are calling them dirty sluts doesn't mean you can too, even if you know that person.
Oh my God, yes.
And even if it seems like it's fun, I've totally seen. I don't even feel like I'd be comfortable. Like if a dominant was telling me, "Here, call my submissive a dirty slut," unless the submissive gave me consent, I don't think that would be cool. Like.
Yeah, and I've come across that before in those humiliation scenes too, where people were actually invited to participate, but didn't observe the scene end. You know, that after the scene was over, they're still over by the coffee pot with them, being like, "You're a fucking dirty slut," whatever.
Yes.
Excuse me, that was for a little period. That was for a scene. We're done with that scene. Don't you dare say that to me again. I wanted to. What do you do if you see something that upsets you or grosses you out?
Leave. Look somewhere else.
Don't look.
Turn your head.
I can speak on this one. I can totally speak on this one. For example, I met someone. What is today? Thursday. I met someone yesterday.
Okay,
and
don't out anybody here.
Oh no,
Speak
I'm
in
not.
general terms.
I'm not outing. No, this isn't like. I'm not gonna out anybody.
No names.
Yeah, no. And they were really into needleplay. And I sat there thinking like, oh, well, that's cool, but I will never watch that because I will like not be conscious anymore. So like that's a perfect example. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that
You got a little queasy hearing about it.
Yeah, I did. And so it's like it doesn't necessarily mean that like, that's them, that's their thing, but and like you can't walk in and like demand that they stop or like pressure them to stop because like you're the person who's not okay with it. So like in that situation, like you need to be the one to leave, not them.
Don't look at my Tumblr.
Okay.
Plenty to gross out there. No, this is something that I think people have a pretty good etiquette about. Sometimes those degradation or humiliation scenes are tough for people to watch. For lack of a better word, let's talk about triggers. That there seems to be a balancing act there where if you're going to do something like that, some people feel like some sort of warning to the rest of the people is appropriate. Some people sort of stick to the rule of if I don't agree with it, I don't have to watch. And therefore, if I'm doing it and you don't like it, then you can find something else to do, go somewhere else, step out for a smoke, leave the party, whatever it is you need to do to get yourself right. But how do you feel about sensitive scenes? If somebody's going to reenact an assault or something like that, and that's something that can be touchy for some people, or a rape or some sort of verbal abuse, is that something? Is it good etiquette to inform anybody before that happens?
Yes
I
and
definitely
no.
think it's good etiquette. Sorry.
You think it's good etiquette?
I think it's good etiquette to inform the space around you, at least the DMs and the host of the party. I think that if anything, there should be someone who's informed, and there should also be people watching that play space area. Like, excuse me. I do think that people should be informed because it was a discussion that was mentioned previous about someone holding a knife to someone's throat, and that person got cut because someone wasn't paying attention and ran into the person. If you're doing something that could be potentially harmful to another person or affect someone else's triggers, there should always be someone who's in the know about that.
I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say that I can't be responsible for anyone else's triggers, and I can't know them in advance. So I shouldn't need to pre-declare something that might be a trigger for someone else. I think the time that you do need to tell the DM, at least I think it's etiquette, is if I'm going to do something particularly edgy or particularly risky, or there's going to be fire involved, or there's going to be something that maybe it's a mind fuck of some sort, where if a casual onlooker such as the DM looks over and sees something that looks wholly unsafe, I might need to go grab the DM in advance and say, hey, there's going to be a mind fuck here, or I'm going to do this, or hey, watch out for this, or Cupcake gave an example where somebody got bumped and they accidentally kind of nicked someone's throat with a knife. You may need to have the dungeon monitor or even a buddy of yours kind of stand guard and make sure that nobody's invading the scene. So I think it's important to let the dungeon monitors know when dangerous or edge play is about to happen, but I don't think that that necessarily applies to just rape triggers or degradation scenes or humiliation.
But okay, my question for that, Brian, is what is the definition for when we should tell someone, because you said like a mind fuck should be something you would tell the DM. So
I
what
will tell a DM.
Well, let me finish my
question.
Let me finish my question real quick.
Go ahead.
So what is the difference between a mindfuck and a rape scene? Like, who is to determine the differences between these different scenes that need to be told to a DM?
I determine that as the top. So what I'm trying to do when I talk to a DM in advance is I'm trying not to get my scene shut down. So I make the distinction by, if I feel like I'm going to do something that could be in any way interpreted by the DM as potentially dangerous enough to shut my scene down, I'm going to go ahead and pre-declare that. Whether it is real, like a neck suspension, or whether it is, fake, like a mindfuck, I'm going to go ahead and pre-declare what I'm going to do to the DM. But I don't think it is incumbent upon me to walk around to every other person at the party and say, hey, I'm about to shove X, Y, and Z into orifice A, B, and C, and if you have, trigger warnings or problems with that, then I don't need to pre-declare my scenes to everybody.
No, and you just kind of made my point for me. That's exactly what I was saying, is you tell a DM when you have a scene that might be shut down. Like, if I'm gonna fucking rape someone in a public space and they're saying no, 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 that's a problem. A DM might not.
Yeah,
they might see that as a problem.
Yeah, if it has the appearance of non-consent, or let's say you're doing a mind fuck that is, you're threatening something that's against the rules of the house, but you can let the DM know ahead of time that I'm not really planning on doing this, but I'm going to fuck with this person. Yeah. You don't want the DM storming in saying, sorry guys, you can't do that,
No,
when it wasn't actually going to happen
tell
anyway.
Everybody in the space, but the DMs definitely do need to know.
Yeah.
There are people that have differing opinions on that. I mean, I happen to agree with you guys that, I'm not responsible for other people's triggers. I can't know what they are ahead of time. And everybody's are different. So if I'm going to whip somebody, if I'm going to hit somebody with a belt, I mean, that might be a trigger for somebody, somebody specifically, but I can't know that. And most people are okay with watching me beat on somebody with a belt. It might be duct tape, where they've got a thing about duct tape. It could be any of those things. And I just feel like, if you are at that space and you have these triggers, and maybe you didn't know that you had them, but I think you should expect to have your buttons pushed in one way or another if you have these kinds of triggers, and you can't really lay that on the responsibility of the people who are having the scene. That's my opinion on it. People will argue that. Some people will say, okay, if you're going to do a racial degradation scene, you obviously know that this is a charged scene, and it's going to push buttons, and you're even doing it for shock value, perhaps. That wouldn't it be nice to just like let everybody know that you're going to be doing a racial degradation scene? Yeah, maybe it would be nice, but I don't feel like that's my responsibility. And I feel like if I'm offending you, then it's incumbent on you to remove yourself, or we've had those issues
If part
before
of the
where
reason
some
you're
people.
doing it is the shock value, you've defeated yourself by clearing it with
No,
other people.
I have to disagree. I want to actually cover something that Brian had said, because I know of some people that have dealt in some socially sensitive scenes, whether
Mhm.
that be somebody who shows up in an SS uniform, or I have seen public race play. I have seen
Crucifixion.
those things. I've seen a live crucifixion. I think, to Brian's point, I think making sure that, like for me personally, I've discussed some of these things with people who run events. I always like to check ahead of time what their policies are going to be, because I'm not worried about offending, right? I'm okay if I offend people in the dungeon, but to Brian's point, I don't want my scene shut down because the policy or the ethic of the space is contrary to that. Right? So I'm going to pre-clear some things just because I don't want the shock value to shut it down. And I think that, to Brian's point, if I speak to the appropriate people, it doesn't affect my capacity to get that shock value, but it makes sure that I'm not going to get shut down for it.
Yep.
Exactly.
But that's just good planning. I don't know if that's an etiquette thing, because not a lot of people if your intention is to show up at a space and flog somebody and somebody gets offended, quite frankly, fuck a bunch of them, right? But if I'm going to show up and do like a racial scene involving slavery and very loud name calling, and I know that I'm going to offend, the only people I'm going to concern myself with are the people who have the ability or the authority to shut my scene down.
Right, and I think the conversation would go something like this. Am I allowed to do that in your space?
Uh-huh.
What are you going to do if people are upset or offended or, offended by this? What are you going to do? And 3, is that something that you want in your dungeon? You know what I mean? Because if they said, look, I'd rather you didn't do that, because I know for a fact that we have some people that are, that would be upset by that, or we've had this issue before, and I wouldn't want to rock the boat like that. Not like, well, screw you, dungeon, you're lame. You don't let me do the kind of play that I like to play. And part of my etiquette is, respecting the space too, and the type of party and the mood and I guess sort of the feel of the party. So if somebody says what you're talking about doing sounds a little bit too edgy for our comfort zone, I would respect that. Even if it's not specifically against the rules, I'm not going to be like, look, it's not in the rules. I'm allowed to do this. I'm just not going to do it.
But conversely, if you're somebody who's going to a space where some of that stuff might happen, it's incumbent on you to be respectful in terms of, like Michael said, it's not your scene to interrupt. Go somewhere else. Go to the social area. Go join your friends having a cigarette. And if you feel compelled to say something to the people after, don't. It's not your kink. It's not your place to tell them how to run their lives. Because I've seen that. I've seen people talk to bottoms going, why do you let them do that to you?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if they're questioning in a way to get education. Because
sure, but that's...
Okay, hold on just a minute. I certainly wouldn't mind someone coming to me after a scene that I just had that was personally, might shock some people. I don't have a problem if someone wants to know or be educated on what I just did and why I did it. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, but there's a difference. I didn't say ask. I said say. Right? If you want to opine, your mic is muted.
Yeah, when people say, I think that's truly disgusting what you guys just did.
That's different than saying, I thought that was cool. I would love to know more about it. That's okay.
But see, even then, I would take it as, I guess it's just me, I would just take it as a time to educate someone anyways. So I may just be weird like that.
I would educate too, and mostly in giving them locations where they could go fuck themselves. But I mean, that's
our shame.
But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that everybody plays differently, right? I mean, it's very easy for us to have a judgment about that scene that involved a chamois and a feather duster in the corner, and to go up to them after and say, wow, that was, you call that play? Really? You had to come to a dungeon and spend your, $30 to come do that? That's a dick move. And whether you're on one end of the spectrum or the other, making a judgment about somebody's play, it's not your place to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I totally get that feeling because coming from Baltimore, I've had a lot of people tell me, "Oh, you guys play too crazy. Oh, you guys are too hard up there. We don't play like that here." So, I totally get that and I understand that.
Yeah. Good discussion, folks. I thought it was really productive. A lot of good questions. I think a lot of good pointers for people who have either never been to a dungeon space before, to a play party, and also to things for just to brush up, because even folks who go to dungeon parties and have been for quite a while need to remember some of these things. So thank you everyone for participating in the discussion. Thank you for the viewers out there who tuned in, and in a couple of weeks we'll come back with another couple of episodes. So good night for now.
Tip your boot black.